Well, tonight we've uncovered another potential bombshell in the IVF industry, one that could rob would-be parents of the chance to have children.
10 News Plus has obtained an email that shows Monash IVF, a company already under scrutiny for repeated high-profile mistakes, is hitting pause on treatment for some patients.
Now, it all rests on a law that Monash may have been misinterpreting for years, and now women and their partners tell us they are devastated.
In the business of IVF, and it is a big business, there is one thing would-be parents don't have: time. So the decision made by Monash IVF to put treatment and hope on ice for some is a contentious one. 10 News Plus has obtained an email sent to prospective parents yesterday. Monash IVF has made the difficult decision to pause some treatments using donated gametes, donated embryos, or embryos created with donated gametes in New South Wales until we undertake a review of donor allocations and patient records to identify which of our patients may be affected. So why are they delaying? It's because of the state's 5-family donor limit. Essentially, it's a rule to stop a single donor's egg or sperm being used to create more than 5 families. It's to limit the number of offspring from one person and reduce the risk of half-siblings unknowingly forming relationships later in life. According to the email, the New South Wales government interprets that rule as applying worldwide. So if any donor has created more than 5 families anywhere in the world, further treatment would be in breach of the legislation. The law in place since 2010 was clarified to Monash yesterday, and now they're halting some treatments until investigations can be undertaken. How long? That's not clear. But it's time these people don't have. One Monash patient has told 10 News Plus she was preparing for insemination from a US donor next month, only to be told she now has no timeline and no guarantee she'll even be able to proceed at all. This was absolutely devastating. Within 48 hours, I went from the elation of finally being told my treatment was starting to the crushing uncertainty that I may not be able to move forward at all, or worse, be forced to start over. IVF is already an incredibly emotional and overwhelming process. The time and energy it takes to select a donor after being knocked back multiple times to finally secure one, and now face the possibility of losing them, is beyond disheartening. She says, I feel like I'm in limbo without clear communication or a way forward. I am emotionally, mentally and financially exhausted. Every part of my life has been built around giving myself the best possible chance at success with this cycle, and this sudden pause has left me feeling broken.
Some women do not have a cycle. They might only have a cycle once every 6 months. They might only have a cycle once a year. You know, they've been taking medications to get to this point, and they were possibly going in for a transfer today or tomorrow, and now being told that they can't do that.
It has been a bad 12 months for the IVF industry in this country, and Monash in particular. Last August, Monash settled a class action for $56 million after hundreds of patients claimed genetic testing led to the wrongful destruction of viable embryos. Monash made no admission of liability. It's one of the largest ever settlements in the industry in this country. Then earlier this year, there were revelations of major mix-ups both in Brisbane and Melbourne, again from Monash IVF. One woman even unwittingly gave birth to another patient's embryo due to human error. There has been a review with state governments tightening oversight into the sector. On this latest issue, the company says Monash IVF has and always will meet its regulatory obligations. We continue to recruit new donors locally and to partner with overseas donor banks to meet patient demand. But they wouldn't say how many patients were affected or how long their treatments are being suspended.
We're going into a weekend now, and all these people are going to be stressing over the weekend. Some may even have suicidal thoughts. When you are trying so hard to have a child and you are continually coming up against roadblocks, procedures that don't happen, this is something else that we just don't need.
But whatever happens now, the victims, as always, are the people with the most to lose, the would-be parents delaying or losing their chance at having a baby.
So much distress contained in that story. Lawyer Samantha Pillay is an expert in health and fertility law. Thank you for joining us. We know that some of these treatments are on hold while records are reviewed. But in your experience, how quickly can all that happen? Is this audit an easy process?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And first of all, I'd like to say just I'd like to acknowledge how upsetting and distressing this must be for the families involved. I've heard some of those stories and my heart really does go out to them. I'd love to say that this could be a quick process, but I suspect that providers will have an uphill battle in this regard. I'm not speaking for any particular provider here, but just looking at it from the outside is not a straightforward process. Firstly, in Australia, we've got no national donor conception register. So each state does its own thing effectively. Some states have donor registers, some don't. And that's really just Australia. So if we think about sperm banks overseas, the ability for providers here to get information from overseas is limited, and it's hard to see any legal mechanism in some cases where there's no contractual arrangement involved. So I think it can be quite difficult. It's important to remember also that auditing is not the core business of IVF providers. What gets IVF clinic staff out of bed every day really is to help families create, start and grow their families. So this is really an extra imposition on them as well.
Can we look at the regulations of IVF, in particular this 5-family rule? Why does it only exist in New South Wales?
It doesn't. Each state has different situations there, so there are different variations on this 5-family rule in different states. For example, ACT enacted legislation last year where the limit is 5 families in the ACT, but for 10 families nationally. Up here in Queensland, we have legislation coming in that will have a 10-family rule, but at the moment there's no limit. So it does vary. It's
so confusing, isn't it? You can see how frustrating it is for people going through this process. And we've just heard so much over recent years about different IVF stuff-ups and bungles. How can the industry be improved?
Yeah, and look, I think you've really hit on the heart of the issue here that's behind a lot of these difficulties we've been seeing. It is confusing. As much as 40 different pieces of legislation have been identified that impact IVF providers nationally. So that is a huge amount of different pieces of legislation that providers need to be across. Most providers in Australia operate not just in one state, but in 2 or more, some of them many. So for those providers, they need to be across different pieces of legislation in different states, different register requirements, different audits, different governance requirements. It's a huge imposition on them as well.
Well, and one question I have for you, I don't know whether you can answer it, but how would an IVF provider ensure that somebody hasn't donated either eggs or sperm anywhere in the world? Is that even feasibly possible?
That is a good question, and I think that is why this is going to be extremely difficult. So they rely on the information provided by the donors at the time, but because in Australia we've got a shortage of donations currently, we're reliant more and more on donations from overseas. So US sperm banks have been at the centre of some recent issues and problems in this regard, and the ability to obtain information depends on firstly the contractual relationship with the US sperm bank or overseas donation agent, and then secondly the information and the consent provided by the donor at the time. There might be privacy issues if their informed consent doesn't include sharing information with other parties. So it's hard to see how this could be done in practice.
And Samantha, we heard from a woman in the earlier report saying that she was not just emotionally and mentally exhausted, but financially exhausted. We know this is already an expensive process. So could more rules mean that the cost of IVF goes up even more?
Absolutely, it is a very expensive process, estimated somewhere around $10,000 per cycle. So it's something that many Australians can't even afford in the first place, and for those who can, it's a significant burden. And look, generally speaking, more regulation means more cost, and that ultimately gets passed on to the consumer. But I think here the issue is not so much having too much regulation, but the inconsistency and the burden on providers of having to comply with different legislation and different requirements in different states.
Okay, Samantha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Ursula, you spent a bit of time talking to that woman in that story today. What's she really looking for?
Well, Hugh, I think she, like so many people now, is the issue for her is that she doesn't know what's going to happen. She's desperate for some kind of clarification on her case and obviously the consideration of the toll that it is taking on her and others just like her. Now, New South Wales Health has released a statement. I do have a copy of that for us tonight. They have said New South Wales Health has consistently and openly maintained its interpretation of the limit and that limit is a worldwide limit. They say this interpretation is neither new nor retrospective, and they will ensure that they work closely with providers to identify and minimise the impact on those affected families. We now know that other companies are also reviewing their policies and seeking clarification now from New South Wales Health, so there could be a lot more to come on this story, Hugh.
Distressing stuff. Thank you, Ursula. Let's take a look at what else is making news.